the internet's kind of built on an open source kind of mentality. The pillars of what all web technologies are built on, Apache,
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
MySQL, PHP. We haven't even mentioned PHP. Like that's a huge,
Yeah.
yeah, TCP/IP.
HTTP protocols.
All of these crazy acronyms that most people know very little about, they all stand for open source.
TCP/IP, Transmission Control Protocol.
Yeah. Don't ever ask what PHP stands for. It's not.
What does PHP stand for?
Don't. I asked you not to ask.
One of
Look
the
it
things
up.
that
It's bad.
I wanted to kind of bring up quickly about MySQL, and yes, they do make money, but one of the things that I found really interesting is how much of that money they actually reinvest back in the open source community. And it's staggering the amount of money that they invest in things like the Free Software Foundation, for example, which is an organization that's dedicated to maintaining and providing free software across the web. And I think it speaks volumes to the level of kind of commitment that people have to open source as a philosophy, that they're willing to go to those lengths. That's something that the CEOs of MySQL could easily be sitting back, saying, I'm going to take my $4 million Christmas bonus this year, but instead they choose to kind of reinvest in the community. And
It's
I
more
think
sustainable, right?
Yeah, exactly. It's something that helps keep them growing and helps keep them developing.
And I think what it does too, it gets people actually to know how to use the tech, right? Because if you have something that costs a lot of money and you have to pay to use it, well, people who are kind of just starting, or people who don't have the money to get those things, are never going to figure out how to use that stuff, right? So by kind of letting people use it and letting people play with it, and letting, say, 13-year-old, 15-year-old kids who really have an interest in this kind of stuff, play with it, go for it, and then they're going to know that tech for the rest of their life, and they're always going to use those products. So they're just going to be built upon. And I think education is at the core of open source, because it is just about teaching people how to use these things so they can build upon them and make things better.
Yeah. I think what's really interesting about the kind of idea of education and how it relates to open source is that, again, it's cyclical. For a lot of people, education means, guy standing at the front of the classroom dictating down to them, and again, open source takes this very kind of collaborative approach in that, you learn by doing, and you learn by, taking what someone else has done, reworking it, and then re-releasing it, and then someone takes what you've done and reworks it and re-releases it, and then, it's a very, very collaborative approach to learning, instead of being this kind of one-way output of information.
See, the way you describe it makes it sound like the way we work on design here.
Definitely.
So, but yet, when you mention open source design at an IXDA event, people's arms are up in the air. I think people just get really, I don't know if it's driven by ego, I don't know if it's driven by, I've spent 5 years learning how to do design, and I don't think it can be done by just anybody. I don't really know what it is, but I know it was, you were there, it was a pretty passionate thing that just all of a sudden popped out of nowhere.
I say some of it is ego.
I totally agree.
And there's a very big personality difference between open source developers and designers, where in the open source world, your contributions, if you get to be a contributor to the core Linux kernel, mad props. And everyone looks at your code, and you get respect based on your coding, etc.
Yeah.
In the design world, it's really, really different.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe you're really sloppy, but your end result is good. Maybe you don't want to show your process, and then the ego and the control and this is mine.
Yeah.
One thing I was going to kind of bring up is, I think this actually, I've kind of seen it happen in actually some realms outside of design, but I think what I've seen happen, particularly with ActionScript 3, kind of relates to this a little bit, in that I found when I first started doing Flash, it was still AS2, AS3 hadn't really come out yet, and I found as soon as kind of AS3 came out, a lot of the kind of communities that had been built up around sharing knowledge about ActionScript really seemed to kind of drop off. And it's been a few years now that I just haven't seen that same level of like sharing in the community. And I think it has a lot to do with the fact that there's this new technology that's come out, and it's something that's in demand, and people see an opportunity there that, you know, hey, I can kind of become like a specialist in this area, and there's an opportunity for me to kind of make money there, and or you know, to gain respect, or gain, you know, recognition. And because of that, people tend to kind of like hoard their knowledge away. And
Yeah.
I think I see that same kind of paradigm in designers in a way that,
Yeah.
you know, there's a lot of designers, particularly people who have, you know, spent a lot of time and money to go and get, you know, officially certified, or, you know, get a formal education in design. You know, you can spend, you know, years of your life, you know, just learning typography or learning color theory.
Yeah.
And, you know, there are these very kind of abstract skills, and I think a lot of people are really hesitant to kind of put that back out into the world just because they've spent so long developing those skills. And I think that it's a very similar paradigm, you know, whether you're talking about open source design or development, that, you know, you are going to get those people that they do want to kind of hoard their knowledge away, and they don't see the benefit in contributing to a community.
Yeah.
Because the benefit of that is their discipline, or what they work on, kind of becomes more popular. You can kind of see that with typography right now, how for hundreds of years, you know, type was kind of set in steel, right?
Yeah.
And you had to actually set type, you had to have access to large machines, and and computers came along, and typography was suddenly like everybody knew fonts, and everybody knew names of fonts, and you could get your hands in that. And then just look at, in the last 10 years, how many amazing new fonts and how much type has grown from something people didn't really know about to something that's like a huge blossoming kind of new discipline that has a resurgence and a renaissance because of the fact that, you know, it's a lot of people building on something previous, but they have the tools, and there's a culture around it that is supporting it, and people aren't doing it to invest in themselves and machines. They're doing it because they think it's cool.
Mm. I think we should leave it at that.
I think that's pretty good.
And I didn't have to talk about licenses.
So
Okay.
for anyone that's more interested in kind of delving into open source, I think I would really recommend the Wikipedia page that kind of defines open source. I know I found a lot of really great resources. It's really full of links, and, you know, if you're interested in learning more about open source, I think it's a great place to start.